25 years, would you believe, of Doctor Who. We'll be meeting a man who's invented a machine which he claims can fly to Australia in half an hour, and I'll be gardening with youngsters. How about that? See you tomorrow. Thank you.
You must never, ever refer to cricket as being silly.
What's this?
It's a box, Sarah.
Whistle it?
Yes, there's cricket on the box in The River, tonight at 8:30 on BBC1.
And now it's time for the South East News with Roy Sheppard.
Good afternoon. Smuggling drugs through the Channel Tunnel could become easier and more profitable than robbing banks, it was claimed today. Customs officers fear drugs will flood into Britain unless effective customs checks are introduced. They're calling on the government to drop plans for on-train customs checks in favour of airport-style checks on land. Some of London's most expensive real estate could be destroyed by the phenomenon of rising groundwater, according to a report previewed in an engineering magazine today. An article in the New Civil Engineer claims that unless a huge pumping programme is introduced within the next 10 to 15 years, then buildings in an area from Westminster to the Isle of Dogs may be severely damaged by London's fast-rising water table. Police in London have begun a murder investigation after a retired solicitor was battered to death. James Durrant, who was 75, was found with head injuries on the landing of his house at Cranes Park Avenue in Surbiton. And police are trying to discover the identity of a Chinese man whose body was found in the River Thames last night. He was discovered on the foreshore near the National Film Theatre on the South Bank. A post-mortem showed he'd been strangled with a rope. A 9-month-old baby girl who went missing from a home at Rainham in Essex last week was reunited with her mother today. Sophie Connolly had been handed in to a church in North London. Police still want to question David Connolly, the baby's stepfather, who's on the run from the army. Southwark councillors have voted to ban a world title boxing fight from taking place next week because it goes against their anti-apartheid policy. The match between South African WBA junior lightweight Brian Mitchell and Camden boxer Jim McDonnell had been due to go ahead at the Elephant and Castle Leisure Centre. The promoter, Mickey Duff, says he'll be seeking a legal injunction against the ban. An appeal for more than £40 million for London's Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital has raised £28 million, more than half its target. It's the first anniversary of the Wishing Well appeal for money to redevelop the world-famous hospital. And the world's first hedgehog ambulance will be presented to the Wildlife Hospital Trust at Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire today. The Trust cares for more than 600 hedgehogs a year from all over the country at a special unit known as St Tiggywinkles. Now staff will be able to collect them in their own vehicle. Up until now, they've usually arrived in Red Star parcels, little prickly holes all over it. Now look at the southeast weather forecast with Ian McCaskill.
Thank you, Roy. For most of us, a bright and breezy afternoon, a high just around 16 Celsius, 61 Fahrenheit, a little bit fresher than it's been recently. Still cloudy along that eastern coast, though. Nearly gale force winds out in the English Channel, by the way. Tonight, most of us, a dry night, a few patches of fog, perhaps the odd spot of rain at times in Kent, though. The low around 7 Celsius, 45 Fahrenheit. Another day with lighter winds tomorrow, generally dry, but becoming cloudy along the south coast. And that's it from me.
In half an hour, we join the neighbours of Ramsay Street, where Gail is finding that pretending to be happily married is a strain. That's here on BBC1.
The 1 o'clock news from the BBC with Michael Buerk.
Good afternoon. A Commons report has accused the government of selling off the Royal Ordnance factories for a fraction of their true value. The land at 2 of the factories is said to be worth double the price the government was paid for the whole business. North Sea Oil rescues Britain's trade and helps cut the monthly deficit by more than half. Joyriding, the cars they're giving young offenders to stop them stealing yours. And at last, the whales are on their way to freedom. An influential committee of MPs has accused the government of having sold off a public asset, the Royal Ordnance arms business, at a fraction of its true value. The Public Accounts Committee, which has a Conservative majority, is unanimous in its report. Last year, the government sold Royal Ordnance to British Aerospace for less than £200 million. Now, British Aerospace plans to close just 2 plants north of London and make what the committee think could be a huge profit of several £100 million. The MP's report follows weeks of growing controversy, during which the government have defended the sale by saying British Aerospace's offer was the best that they could get. From Westminster, our political correspondent, Lance Price.
The Ministry of Defence got twice as much for Royal Ordnance as they've been told to expect by independent merchant bankers. They say British Aerospace secured the factories against competition from half a dozen other companies, and the best possible price was paid. But the Public Accounts Committee, whose report was put together before the closure of the sites was announced, is highly critical of the ministry, saying the MOD did not explore the possibility of redevelopment, and urging that in future any feasible planning permission should be obtained before offers are invited. One idea is that a clause should be written into agreements like the one for Royal Ordnance, stipulating that if profits are made on the sale of assets, a share of the money should go back to the ministry. The committee believes recent reports suggesting that British Aerospace could make profits of over £400 million show that the existing arrangements have to be changed.
Now, if it's true that these sites are worth several hundred millions and they valued them at £3.5 million, then the taxpayer has been done out of a very substantial sum of money to which the Ministry of Defence ought to have paid the closest attention.
But surely the Ministry of Defence was selling a company. They weren't selling redevelopment land.
No, but they have to take into account the value of all the aspects of the business. And one of the important ones was that £3.5 million, which is maybe worth several £100 million.
The committee has now asked the Comptroller and Auditor General to carry out a further urgent investigation and to report back in a matter of weeks.
Joining me now in our Westminster studio is Timothy Sainsbury, the Under-Secretary of State for Defence. Mr. Sainsbury, did you really not know that the value of those 2 London sites alone was twice what you were being paid for the whole concern? And if you did not know, why did you not know?
Well, the first thing I think we must establish is those figures which have been quoted are highly speculative and are based on assumptions about planning permissions that might one day be obtained, which I think may well be found to be unjustified.
Well, as I understand it, at least one of the sites does have planning permission already, doesn't it?
No, at the time of the sale, there were planning applications for both of the sites, for redevelopment of part only of both of the sites. Both of the sites are in the Metropolitan Green Belt, and both of those planning applications were subsequently refused. And I've got in my hand the valuation prepared by very eminent professional surveyors. And in referring to Waltham Abbey, the valuation says the land is within the Metropolitan Green Belt and redevelopment would be resisted. Our valuation assumes mainly agricultural or recreational use, but with hope value of obtaining limited industrial or warehouse consents over a period.
But
and I think that reflects the reality.
That assumption is generally thought now to be wrong. You're not seriously suggesting that this land is only worth the £3.5 million that it was suggested at the time of the sale, are you?
I think it is for the expert to determine in due course, in the light of what planning permissions might be obtained, what the value is. But to suggest that the whole site is at maximum value without even allowing for the costs of decontamination, relocation, servicing the site and all the other factors, plus the delay, seems to me to be highly speculative.
But the Public Accounts Committee, which has a Conservative majority, is saying the taxpayer is being done out of several £100 million. Are you saying that's not true?
No, I'm not, actually, but I don't think that's what the Public Accounts Committee are saying either. We've only just received the report.
That's what Mr Sheldon has just said on our programme, Mr Sainsbury.
No, that's not what Bob Sheldon said. We have only just received the report. I haven't had time to study it in detail, but it does seem to me to be using much more restrained language than some of the reports seem to be trying to reflect.
British Aerospace is going to close factories, make redundancies, and it appears likely to be taking a profit from the land. You are being accused of allowing asset stripping. Is that accusation not fair?
No, I think we sold a business with all the pluses and minuses that go with selling a business. The liabilities to the companies and the government with whom they had contracts, the important responsibilities they had in respect of their staff. If they were going to have rearrangement of their production facilities, there could be job losses, there could be redundancies. They've got to be taken into account. We got a price which has already been said was nearly twice that which we had received independent advice as to be the amount that we would likely to be receiving if we floated the company.
Mr. Sainsbury, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Whites in South Africa have registered a powerful vote for old-style, rigid apartheid. The extremist Conservative Party, to the right of the Nationalist Party government, has made significant gains in the local elections. The elections are segregated. Each racial grouping votes for separate councils. With the results still coming in, the state-run radio says about a third of registered black voters did actually